In a letter of the Belgian Parliament this week, Iraq's government has insisted that it will keep its deadline to close Ashraf on 31 December. The Foreign Minister of Belgium, Steven van Akkeren, who was speaking in the Senate last week, has declared his opposition to this impossible deadline as neither reasonable nor realistic. Tomorrow, the EU foreign ministers must condemn this deadline. They must condemn a forcible displacement of Ashraf residents.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have 1 month to go. Within the next 4 weeks, we know now from intelligence from inside Iraq that there will be a massive attack mounted against the 3,400 defenseless men and women in Camp Ashraf, including 1,000 women. And we are told all the time by the UN and the EU that we must trust these people's safety to the Iraqi authorities. The Iraqi authorities who twice before have mounted massacres. Now, when we hear from the EU and the UN that we must respect the sovereignty of the Iraqi government, Hitler had sovereignty over the Jews in Nazi Germany. Is this the kind of sovereignty we must respect? For God's sake, EU and UN, wake up, show that you have some spine, some metal, and tell Nouri al-Maliki his deadline for clearing this camp by the end of this year is outrageous. The UNHCR must be given the time and space to register these people as refugees in order that our EU resettlement plan can be put into place and we can evacuate these people to countries of safety. Nothing else than that will do.
I've come today to the capital of Europe to ask the European Commission, the Council of the European Union, and its High Representative to use their power and good offices to prevent a crime against humanity. I therefore would like to request the session of Council of Foreign Ministers, which will be held tomorrow, to firmly oppose the relocation of the residents, demand the extension of the deadline for closing Ashraf, and to accept any number of ill and wounded residents in their countries.
The current lack of cooperation by the Iraqi government with the UNHCR is preventing a UN body from doing its job, a job that it wants to do and is willing to do. The European Union should not facilitate such a flouting of the international community or of the United Nations Charter. And just as the West was prepared to intervene in other situations, unless it is to be accused of hypocrisy, grave hypocrisy, it must intervene now by telling the government in Baghdad that it will impose sanctions unless the deadline is extended. Thank you.
Le camp d'Ashraf, aujourd'hui, représente à la figure du monde la résistance aux mollahs en Iran. Le soutien aujourd'hui aux habitants du camp d'Ashraf est donc un devoir international pour les démocrates du monde entier. Il faut aujourd'hui peser de tout notre poids par rapport aux chefs d'État et de gouvernement qui vont se réunir, ou aux ministres qui vont se réunir demain au niveau européen, pour dire nous n'accepterons pas que le 31 décembre, le régime irakien puisse démanteler ce camp et massacrer les habitants d'Ashraf.
If Iraq is still intent on the forcible relocation of the Ashraf residents, they will have no other option but to resist. I know them personally. But if our governments in Europe, in the United States, are not supporting the rights of the people in Ashraf, it is entirely natural that they would prefer an honorable death than surrender to be killed at a later stage after being tortured and brutally undignified. The only way left to prevent a massacre of unarmed and defenseless residents is the general affirmation of Ashraf residents' refugee status by the United Nations. We ask again, Mrs. Ashton, to urge the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to follow this line.
If the Iraqi government is not going to comply, if they're not going to guarantee the safety of the residents of Camp Ashraf, then we ought to quit, we and the EU combined, ought to quit pouring billions of dollars of aid into the Maliki government. It is an international community responsibility to use that economic tool. And both we, US, and the EU have a powerful tool there, but it takes political courage to use it. And I encourage the EU tomorrow to send that signal that you have the political courage to use it and try to drag the United States along with you. Both the US, the UN, and the EU must notify Maliki that Ashraf cannot be closed until the UN High Commissioner for Refugees has completed its work on behalf of the Ashraf residents.
Tomorrow's meeting must produce a clear result on the deadline must be lifted, relocation in Iraq is not possible, and Iraq must cooperate constructively to find a lasting humanitarian solution for the people there. And it is, for the European Union, it's time to explain them that we are not just uttering some words, normal, polite, diplomatic language, but at this time it's really serious, and that Iraq must face serious consequences if the government there will not comply. And I fully agree with the speakers here said that economic pressure is absolutely needed.
I will concede that the United States has more culpability in this matter. That is, the United States will bear the largest part of the blame, short of Maliki himself, if harm comes to those in Ashraf. We have an obligation, and we have the means, even while we still have troops on the ground in Iraq, to stop this from happening. But Europe must lead the way morally, as you have for some time in the area of human rights. Tomorrow's meeting of the foreign ministers cannot just be another exercise in debating. There has to be real action that comes out of that meeting. And you do have the power, not just to condemn and send more letters. You have the power to make it clear that you will impose, to seek, as the European Union, sanctions against Iraq for any violence that might come to the residents of Ashraf. Even though the United States has greater culpability in this matter than the European Union must lead tomorrow. Secondly, the President of the United States, as you may remember, received the Nobel Peace Prize a little over 2 years ago. He himself was very modest in accepting that. He said something like, one day, this is a little early, I hope to earn this. Well, in 31 days, we are going to find out if the President of the United States has earned his Nobel Peace Prize. I have never heard of a Nobel laureate who stood aside while mass murder took place.
And it was said several times, this date is unacceptable. And when we don't reach to bring this message over tomorrow, then we have lost. When it was said this morning we need a collective approach, I think politically we need it, because these interviews with everybody, I don't believe that they feel to more justice and humanity. We have to defend it as a whole group in big danger and to give them a status outside. No forced relocation within Iraq.
We heard after World War II, never again. And how many times over the last 50 years have we seen the atrocities repeat themselves? Now, today, the test is before us again. And it's not just a test for the people of Camp Ashraf, although clearly it's their lives who are on the line. It's really a test for all humanity who now knows what is about to happen and who has a choice today through the foreign ministers tomorrow and through the visit of Nouri al-Maliki to the United States on December 12th to clearly express that we will not compromise with evil.